the QR code there is for the slightly extended version of these slides. I'll tell you what is missing when I go a little bit further. That is my website to see if you want to see other things I've been up to. If you're hiring in the DevRel space, also please let me know. All right. Okay, so if you hear someone just say auth, that can be pretty vague. You have to actually know what they're talking about specifically there. Like we have things like we have auth-n, we have auth-z, like. So basically for auth-n, which is authentication, it is a matter of like who you are. So for instance, like that is Paul, I'm Tiffany, etc. And then for authorization or auth-z, then it's basically like what are you allowed to do. So I'm going to be going next into auth-n. So there's a link at the bottom there if you want to go to the Kubernetes docs to look more into it, besides what will be going on in this talk. So for provisioning users, Kubernetes is pretty flexible with this. You can use things like TLS certs, maybe like with your own CA, or maybe not. But since the Kubernetes API server doesn't support revocation for your certs, you should make sure to use short-lived ones. You can use OIDC tokens with any OIDC provider, so something like in-house, maybe Dex or Keycloak or SAS or like Okta, and in turn, you can plug that into your cloud's IAM. For example, you can map like your cloud provider users to your Kubernetes users. Or you can use things like service accounts to provision users. So that's the direction that I'll be going inside of this talk. The part that is in the slides that I'm not going to go into is the part on certificates and on tokens. And so just like as a little fun side note, for Kubernetes, you don't go and do something like, hey, create user. You give, for example, like create deployments, permissions to, I don't know, like Jane Doe or something like that. As long as like someone shows up with like a valid certificate or OIDC token for Jane Doe, then they can go and create pods. So service accounts typically are used for like processes, programs, services running autonomously on your cluster, but nothing actually prevents us from being able to use those to manage like access and permissions for our users, even if that's not necessarily what they were meant for in the first place. So for demo purposes, and well, you can also do that as well, I'm going to be using service accounts and doing that for my everything with the role-based access control there. And if it's one way that you can go about things, if you don't want to take the effort of going and setting up TLS certs or doing OIDC-based authentication. So a service account basically is just like some user with like a kind of funny looking name there. You can see it in this first bullet point there. So it's like system, service account, whatever your namespace is, and then your service account name. By default, every single namespace has a default service account. So you can at least start with that if you wanted to. And then service account tokens are JOTs, so the JWT. They're like OIDC tokens, but they're generated by the Kubernetes control plane, and it's specifically a controller in the controller manager, and we'll be taking a look into that as well. All right, so now I'm going to look into role-based access control, so auth-z specifically for, and that, yeah, so people, a lot of times they just say RBAC, since that's kind of a lot of words sometimes. So who here has actually used RBAC in Kubernetes? Okay, maybe half the room. All right, so like as a high level, basically you define some sort of role. So that is specific to a namespace, or you could define some sort of cluster role, so then that is for, well, your entire cluster. And it's a collection of permissions of things that can be done. For instance, list pods, scale deployments, be able to create a deployment, be able to just, like various different things that you can do within your cluster. Then you need to go and bind the role to some sort of user or group or service account with using a role binding or a cluster role binding. There are a bunch of different cluster roles that already exist. So there's like one that you can view everything that you have in your cluster, etc. So this is just like an example role that I will actually be using a little bit later. So basically for this one, it's just giving you the ability to get and list all of the pods that are in the CDS namespace. And then with that, you have to create a role binding, and this one is just using the default service account inside of that namespace. So once you go and try giving people a bunch of permissions, it's really important to make sure that you actually audit them and that you are actually giving the permissions that you think you are giving them, because bad things can happen otherwise. So by default, kube control, as Abdel and I looked into recently of how to properly say it, kube control has auth and then can I -- list, and then you can actually go and list out the permissions that are there. And then there's a bunch of other plugins that you can go and install as well. So there's different ones there if you want to look those up too. Okay, so that comes to demo time. Theoretically. Okay. Okay, so I just am running a kind cluster locally to have fewer issues if anything happens with the internet. Since I am very lazy, I just use K for an alias as kubectl. So I'm just going to create a namespace for this conference. Who here has heard of Kubernetes? Okay. So basically, Ahmet Albakan has two tools, Kubernetes and CTX, where basically for Kubernetes, you can go and switch between namespaces. So if I just hit enter right now, I can see the different namespaces that I have. And then you actually are doing everything inside of that namespace, so you don't have to do a -n on every single thing you run. And then CTX just is a shorter, easier way to switch between Kubernetes contexts. Okay, so next I'm just going to create some deployments. So I'm just using a specific Nginx image. That way it's already inside of my cluster, so that I don't have to go and do that and like wait for it. All right. So if I do get pods, I can see that they're already up and running. Okay, so I just have those two running. And is the font legible for everyone? Okay, cool. Okay, so over here I am going to run this image. So basically, I'm just going to create a shell in this pod so that way I can do stuff from within the pod for the container that's running there. Who here has heard of Nixery? Nobody except for, yeah, I was like, you know, I know you have. So basically with Nixery, it's really cool if, say, instead of trying to go find like you could try finding an image that happens to have everything you need. If you found one, great. Otherwise, one of the ways that people do that is they create a Docker file, and I added this new thing that I think that basically I never remember if it actually put all the rest of the text. But basically, some people might end up doing something like a Docker file and then adding all the different tools that you need. With this, you basically, after nixery.dev, do a / and separate all the different tools. You can't do it for everything, but there's quite a lot. So for this one, I have shell, I have kubectl, I have curl, I have JQ, all within this container without having to actually create much of anything there. Okay, so within here, if I tried to do a kubectl get pods, I can't do that. So like when I was just doing it directly from my laptop, not inside of a pod in the cluster, like I could, since I have all the permissions to do that. But here we can see that it says that my service account CDS in the CDS namespace called default doesn't have the ability to list pods in the API group and in that namespace. If I did like a kubectl auth, can I, whoops. Usually when you actually have the ability to go and say, if I did it over here, if I did a kubectl auth, can I -list, we can see here that I have this star here and I can do literally whatever I want on this cluster. But if we take a look here, we can see that I don't have that permissions. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to go and create the role. So first I can go create role. So with this, I'm just doing, it's the one that we saw on the slides, and I'm just giving the ability to do a get, a list on pods. Whoops. I'm still not used to this thing. I think I got it from Matthias, and it makes my life easier, but it also makes it harder because I forget to actually tab it over. Okay. So then now that we have that, we actually need to have a role binding to map that with our service count. Okay, cool. So now if we go back over here, if we try doing a kubectl get pods, we can actually now see the pods. If we were to do like a kubectl git deployments, we still don't have permissions for that. So basically just based on what permissions we gave in our role. All right, so if we do this same thing here, and if I do a -v6, we can see the path where the request is actually happening with. So we can see that it's v1, namespaces, CDS, and then pods. If I were to try to just do a curl on this, and I'm going to do -k right now for insecure, which, I mean, you shouldn't actually be doing that, but that's just what I'm doing for now. If I try doing a curl on that, we can see that it says it's forbidden. So like, even though right now I have it where with kubectl, I can go and see things, there's something that's missing for where if I try doing a curl within here that I can't actually see what my different pods are. So basically, if we look in this one directory here, there is this token. So as of, I think it was maybe Kubernetes 121 or so, instead of having just a secret that existed perpetually, there is a service account token that is created inside of every single pod that you create. So with the kubectl that's in here, it has access, it knows about this token, and then therefore it has the ability to actually make the call and see like what the different pods are. So part of the reason with for this binded service token is that way it goes away if you get rid of, if someone got access to a specific token on a specific pod, then you can get rid of that pod and that token is no longer around. Okay, so if I just do a cat on that, I can export that. Actually, I'm just going to do it this way, since I always end up copying the SH part and then regretting it. And I can also regret this too. There we go. Okay, so right now this, at least to my eyes, looks like a bunch of gibberish. If we go over here, if you go to jot.io or jwt.io and you paste it in here, you can actually see what it actually means. I don't know if it's very visible there, but basically, yeah, you can see like, hey, this is here's my Kubernetes cluster. Here is the namespace. You can see like what pod is being run, like what pod this one is. You can see that it's using the default service account, but basically you can actually go and see what this means. So if we go back over here, so there's also like if we do env, there are some environment variables too, so you don't have to necessarily go and do a curl or like do the -v6 to figure out what the IP address is. Like you can see like what the like Kubernetes port and like the service host and things like that are. So you could do that as well. So basically, if we now instead just did a curl, which I'm going to just go and copy this path again. Okay, so if we can do our -k again for now. And then, so we can also give it a header. So if I give it authorization, and then bearer, and then I'm going to give it the token. And who here's heard of JQ? Okay, most people. Yeah, basically, if you like pretty formatting. So then I'm going to use JQ, and let's go look at the items and metadata and names. Let's see if I did that right. Oh, I did something wrong.
The colon authorization.
Sorry, yeah.
The header, the colon. Yep.
Wait, what?
This must be deleted.
The colon?
Yeah, that's correct.
No. Wait, let me see what this is. That's okay. There we go. Is what I did earlier. Did I just do this? Yeah, I added an S. All right. And thanks. Yeah, so typos. Anyway, but basically, yeah, we can see now that we added that token, we can actually do a curl, and we can see what is in there. But now we still have the issue of, hey, I'm using -k. which is the same thing as -- insecure, which again is not exactly the best thing to go about doing. So if we go back and do the curl here, if I get rid of the -k, so we can also, I shall put this at the end. So there is a CA cert option, and if we go back also in the same directory, there's a CA cert. So now basically you're using the cert, you're using that token, and you can effectively, and with the RBAC permissions that were added, can now actually do the same stuff as if you were using kubectl, or like a limited version of the access if you were doing it on just like your own like desktop thing like I was doing earlier. Okay, so now if I go back over here, I'm just going to go create another pod here that I'm going to run from inside of. So let's do that. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I am going to set the token to the one I have over here. Okay, and then if I were to just copy this curl, so I'm in a different pod right now. So if we just went over here. Okay, so this lovely blue, greenish, whatever colored screen is this tester one. This yellow one is the one that I called parrot. So right now, from that one, using the token of the other one, I can actually go and see stuff. Because like if I were to do, look at the one in here, we can see, so that's a different, like you can see that it's a little bit different. So basically, yeah, if you look at the very end of it, so this ends in ZW, this one ends in JQ. But basically right now, we can see stuff over there. So if I were to actually go in here, and I am just going to exit out of here. So if we do a kget pods, we can see that the tester one is now gone. And if I were to try doing this curl again, if I get rid of that, we can say that because I deleted that pod, that service count token is no longer there since it's bounded. So basically, we don't have access to do that anymore. Okay, so let's see. So I'm going to exit out of this. Okay, so right now we've been doing stuff with just like the default service account. I just added permissions to be able to go and view things. I can't actually do anything specific with some of that stuff. So let's kind of take a look of like what other things that you can go and do. All right, so I'm going to create my own service account this time. And I'm going to call it scalar. So if I do this, okay. So the thing, at least last time I checked, I should double check if this has changed, but if you are using your own service account when you were trying to run a pod, you actually have, at one point in time, there used to be a -- service account, and now you need to actually use an override. So you have to give it the JSON and give it the service account that way, which it works, it just looks a little bit jankier. Okay, and I did something wrong. I forgot to hit. Okay, let's see. There we go. One day I will get used to this new thing where I actually have to hit the right arrow or figure out how to make it show it a different color for what is not actually there yet. Okay, so basically, as I was mentioning earlier, there are cluster roles that are there by default. So if I did, I think, oh, yeah, I can't do that in here. All right, so let's go. So there's a bunch that are here by default. So I didn't make any of these. There's one there that's just called view. So if I go back over here, I'm going to go and just create a cluster role binding that is with using the view. Actually, I needed to be, whoop. Okay. So now if I try doing a kubectl get all, I can see literally everything. Well, everything that get all lets you see, which is not actually everything that is in the cluster, but at least it's stuff like your pods, your deployments, replica sets, things like that. Okay, so if I were to try doing something else though, if I try doing a kubectl scale deployment, I don't have permissions to go and do that. So what we can do is I can go and create a role specifically for being able to scale. Like if I do a create role, so if I have this here, you can see that it's giving it the permissions to do a patch, but it's specifically on deployment/scale. That way you can't actually patch everything about a deployment. And then I'm giving it just my resource name, Nginx, because I don't want people to be able to do something to anything other than that resource. Okay. Oh. Again, I will one day get this. All right, cool. All right, so then now that we have that, we need to have a role binding. Okay. So if I go back over here, I can do a kubectl scale deployment, Nginx replicas equals 2. So if we get pods, or one of the problems with being lazy is you can't always be lazy. All right, so then we can see, let's see. Yeah, we can see that we have 2 pods here. If I were to try to do a kubectl scale deployment web and try doing replicas equals 2, we can see that one, since I didn't put, like since I specifically put Nginx, it doesn't allow me to go and mess with that one as well. So then if I, let's see, so we can scale it. If I also wanted to try to, I don't know, like delete or also something that I can't go and do. Okay, so what if we, back over here, decide to delete the cluster role binding? So right now I have it where I have my ability to do, so I had the view for everything, and then I have the one that does the patch. So if I did a k get role, so this is the one that I had afterwards. So basically it's for Nginx, I have scale, and I have the patch. So if we were to go and try to do a scale again on Nginx, it actually doesn't let you do that because you can't actually, if you need to be able to view what the different pods are or what the different, like you need to be able to view the deployment in order to actually be able to do something with it. So since I deleted the cluster view, it removed the ability to actually go and be able to do that, which is not great. So basically what we need to do is then with the way that it is for passing things in via command line for kubectl, when you go and try doing things for creating a role, there's certain things that it doesn't let you necessarily do everything that you may want to do. So for the instance, for this one, I can pass in everything that I have for deployment, scale, and patch. But if I were to try adding like a get or things like that, it would do it specifically on what I have there. Or if I added deployments, it would make it so I can patch and do get and everything with both deployments and deployment/scale, which is not what I want. So I'm just going to go and just edit it this time around. And I used to be a lot better at Vim, so it's just gotten worse. But if I paste that in here again and switch this, and then make this a get, oops. Okay, so now that I went and edited that, if we go back over here, and since I already have 2 replicas, I'm just going to go scale it to 1. So now we can see that we can even just look at kubectl get deploy. So, oh my goodness. There we go. Okay, so basically now we can see that we're able to scale it. But yeah, basically it's just instead of taking away permissions, like giving people as little permissions as they possibly need in order to do the things that they should be doing. So like if I did a kubectl auth, I don't even know if I have permissions. Yeah, I don't think I gave it permissions to do that. Oh, there we go. Let's see. So yeah, here we can see at the bottom now that I specifically have permissions for my deployments to be able to get them, and for deployment/scale, I can do a patch, and it's specifically on the Nginx resource name. So then, actually back here, and then like say if I were to try doing a kubectl get deployment again, like which I was just doing earlier, now you can't do that. Whereas earlier when I had the view all, I could go and see all of that. So yeah, that's basically the general gist of things there. If I go back to wherever these are. But yeah, so basically, if you went to, let's see if I can just easily jump back to here. If you go to the slides that are on this, everything that I did via the demo is also there in slide form. So you can go and run it inside of your own cluster. Again, mine was just using a kind cluster. You don't have to have it specifically managed or needing a bunch of like load balancers or anything like that. That isn't something that you specifically might have otherwise. So yeah, basically that's that. And then like I go into things on certificates a bit more, actually a lot more because I didn't really do that here, and on tokens as well. So you can try figuring out what works best for you. And yeah, so let's see. So yeah, thank you for coming. And yeah, if you end up having any questions or whatnot, either now or afterwards, that is totally cool. And yeah, thanks.
That was wonderful. You've done definitely the most live coding anyone's done in this room today. And I didn't know about Nixery, so that was also really cool. I've just got one question, and there's also one in the Slido. The question on the Slido is, how do you lifecycle/revoke credentials for users if they're using a certificate-based auth?
Well, the Kubernetes API doesn't allow you to revoke certificates, so basically you just need to end up having a short-lived one and hope that it's short enough that it doesn't become an issue.
And the next one is, how does an admin audit the user action? If we assign a role to 10 developers and one of them does some task on a cluster, how can we audit which user did that?
I mean, like, based on, if you're giving each person a specific user, based on things like with logging, etc., you should be able to see like which user did some specific action. You can't, if you gave like every user, I mean, every person the same user, or all 10 of them the same user, that obviously would be a problem. But yeah, with things like logging and whatnot, you can actually have it like for each, because each user is a specific thing and can be able to then see, apparently I got a reminder to do my taxes. So basically you can just like see based on logging what each specific person went and did.
And then my question was going to be, so please, there's still time, so please do post questions. My question was going to be, do you have any tools or any tips about how to manage these service accounts if they become like, if you have a very large team, or, do you know what I mean?
I know what you mean. But I don't really have a good answer for that. If you have a really large team and you're really trying to go into things, it probably is better to use something like certificates or IDC, and then like actually assigning things to like, hey, say if you're using a managed offering, some sort of cloud, and actually tying things with IAM, et cetera, instead of just having only service accounts.
Yeah, and someone posted about managing RBAC in a corporation, but I think that's kind of
the same. Not exactly. You would not want to use kubectl. Like, it would probably be yeah, again, either certificates or doing something with OIDC, and whether it's something that's specific to like a cloud provider you're using or something that is to your own, how your own company does things with like IAM, et cetera, and then setting it up that way. There's a few slides earlier on the QR code. There's a few slides that actually go into that a little bit that can help. But yeah, if you have more questions on that, feel free to ask. I'm just...
Wait 2 seconds, I'm coming with him.
Basically, we use AKS, and there usually we follow the practice of AZ AKS get credentials. Someone can use it, and we know the problem that with that way, if someone is doing something, you can really not audit anything. If I get the credentials like AZ AKS get credentials, and I have the certificate, and if I delete something, even in the Grafana, you cannot really know who did that. You just see that at like max, like there was some Mac OS client or some Windows client, but you don't know. But with the service account strategy that you told, so that was my question. Like with this, can you really know if you run some kubectl command, and so some admin can want to see, okay, who did that? Is there anything like that?
I am not actually sure. Does anybody else here know?
I don't think service accounts are for individual management. It's more for like sharing the same permissions. So I think we're talking about different things, definitely. Okay. Well, let's give one more round of applause for Tiffany.